of the Muslim scholars. So
Correct.
yeah, so the Ard al-Muqaddasa basically is a wider region.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for clarifying.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I'm just revising the points because this terminology is going to be used again today, inshallah.
Hafsa, can you share this? Can you see the screen?
Yes, I can. Just give me a minute before I start. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. So today we're going to focus on the geography of the Quran. So when we talk about the stories of the prophets, where it actually happened. And it's very sad that we read all these Qasasul Anbiya, we read these stories, not, I won't say every one of you, but majority of us. We studied the stories of the prophets in details, in tafsir, and we've heard them since our childhood, but we've never told this all is happening in the blessed land, in the Holy Land, in Palestine and Syria and this part of the region. So the geography was completely, I would say, eradicated or completely, it was not taught to us. So even in the Kutub Tafsir, you read the story, but it will mention some old names, very old names that we don't even know, and we don't know where it's happening. So this is the basic, the motive behind this is to give people this view that when we talk about this, where is it actually happening? So the geography of Quran is basically this region, this holy land and blessed land, and mostly Palestine. So the focus is on this. So we will talk about and 80% of the prophets mentioned in the Quran are, are, are from this region. So how surprising is this that we just we are so disconnected in this region that the people living in that region are just suffering alone, and we can't even, because firstly we lost the Islamic significance as a knowledge. We were never told the Islamic significance of that region. And then secondly, we from a moral point of view, we're not able to, stand up for them and fight with them. Okay. So the first prophet, please move on to the next slide. So the first prophet we will talk about is Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam. Now, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam is a very key figure in Islam, in the Quran, and his story is mentioned over and over again. And so last time when we mentioned Ardul Mubarakah, so we talked about Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam and Hazrat Lut alayhi salam, who traveled from, Iraq to Syria, and they stayed in Haran. Fadan, Haran is a very important area, and a lot of prophets from his progeny, they lived there, they traveled to that region. So you can see now I've used this map as a, just as to give a, so it's clear in your mind what part of the world are we talking about. So I hope people understand. So the region here, there's two continents here. So this is on the left is Africa and the right is Asia. And we can see where it's written. If everyone cannot read Urdu and Arabic, I'm really sorry for that. But because this is from Atlas al-Quran, the Atlas of the Quran, it's a special book which talks about the geographical locations of the stories and the qisas or anything mentioned in the Quran. It talks about that. And they point every place on the map. So that's why I've used this. I think you can read Arabic and Urdu. They can easily read this. While I'm talking, you can look at this map and you can see that the first, who's sharing the screen, can you please use the pointer? So you start from the right side and you can see the arrows. They're moving from the Iraq, where Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam was born, and he faced the tyrant king Namrud. So on the right side is Ur. And from there, he traveled all the way to Haran, Fadan, where it's written, that's Syria. And there from Halab he came to Beit al-Maqdis. So Beit al-Maqdis was a city that was already flourishing at that time. So throughout history, we will hear about, it had different names, an old name. It is a very old, historical, ancient place, which was called Canaan. the land of Canaan. And it comes in Bible as well. So Canaanites, there were different nations who used to live there at different parts of the time. The earliest names that we get of this place is Ursalim or Urshalim. From there, the Hebrews, they changed into Hebrew to Jerusalem and, Urshalim and all this. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our holy prophet, they call it Baytul Maqdis, the holy house of Allah. So from all the way from Iraq, he travels to, Allah Ta'ala told him to go to this Ard al-Mubarakah and Ard al-Muqaddas, and he stayed there, and then he continued his journey. He went to, Arabia, and there he built, he left Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam with Hazrat Hajar in Kaaba, in Haram, and there he built Kaaba with Hazrat Ismail alayhi salam grew older. Hazrat Ibrahim built the Kaaba, and some Mufassirin and some scholars have said that Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam built Kaaba with Ismail alayhi salam, and Hazrat Ibrahim built Bayt al-Maqdis, the masjid there, with Hazrat Ishaq alayhi salam, because Ishaq and Ismail were both born in Bayt al-Maqdis. And then Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam also went to Bir al-Sabr, which is now called Beersheba. It is near Bayt al-Maqdis. If you can zoom in and where it's written Bayt al-Maqdis, just a little far off is Bir al-Sabr. It meant 7 wells. So he stayed there, and then that city is also very important. And then he moved to Al-Khalil, and he passed away in Al-Khalil. Al-Khalil at that time was called Hebron. It's called Hebron as well. The English name is Hebron. And because of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, it's called Al-Khalil. Because Ibrahim alayhi salam was the Khalilullah. So he was, he passed away there and he's buried there. So, and the ulama have said that there's, we can't be sure of the graves of the Prophet apart from 2. So we know that the grave of the Holy Prophet is in Medina, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And the grave of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam is so much tawatur in that riwayah that we are sure that he is buried in Al-Khalil. And from a lot of prophets from his progeny are said to be buried in the same cave near the Masjid al-Ibrahimi. There's said to be a cave under. There's a masjid that was built in the Umayyad period, and it was renovated later on, and now it's under Zionist control. So 60% they've converted into a synagogue. It's called Masjid al-Ibrahimi. And it's a very big mosque, historical mosque. It's converted into a synagogue, and there's a lot goes on that's very upsetting for Muslims. So they say, because they connect themselves with Ibrahim alayhi salam, Abraham, and then so they took over it. They play music, they dance, the way they do worship. So and then 40% is still, they give it to Muslim, but the control is with the Zionists, with the Israeli government, and they stop the Muslim whenever they want, and they let them in whenever they want. So so this was the movement of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam towards this holy land. And please move on to the next slide. So with Ibrahim alayhi salam, there was his nephew who was Lut alayhi salam, who traveled from with Ibrahim alayhi salam from Iraq. Some say he was from Iraq, and some say he joined him from Syria. But he was the believer. They were only the few believers at that time. They were only the 2 believers of the Deen Ibrahimi at that time. So he came with Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam to this holy land. Now, where we heard about Qawm Lut and the story how they were destroyed because of the sin of homosexuality. Where did this happen? This happened in the heart of the Holy Land. They were doing this. Allah gave them a chance, and he made Lut alayhi salam a prophet, and he sent him towards the people of Sodom and Gomorrah, which is called Sodom and Amorah in Arabic, and Sodom and Gomorrah. So these towns of Sodom and Gomorrah can be seen circled in red. So this is the area that is between the water just above this red circle is the Dead Sea, which is the Jordan River. And this is between Jordan and Palestine. Just on the border of Jordan and Palestine, this is the area. And there they were in the heart of the Holy Land committing this big sin. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala destroyed them, and we know the story. So the point here is that we should know that where did this happen? The story of Lut alayhi salam, it's mentioned in the Quran, and Allah sent so many azab for them. The 5 different kind of punishments that were sent for them. And even now, the people who travel there, they have seen that there's layering, and you can say that there's a rock formation, and there's a lot of sulfur in that land, in that very area. And if you pick up a sulfur stone, if you still pick up the small, the sediments, the sedimentary rocks, they still burn. You burn them, and they will still light up. So the nature of that whole valley is changed, and the Dead Sea is the lowest part of low. It was because of the azab. It was so buried. The land was so like it actually went really down because of the azab of Allah, and then it's the lowest point on the face of the earth right now. And Quran also refers to this area as Adna al-Ard when he talks about the prophecy of Ghulibat al-Rum, and we will talk about it later, inshallah. So this was Lut alayhi salam, who was the nephew of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam. Yes, please move on to the next slide. So then it's Ishaq alayhi salam and Yaqub alayhi salam. So Ishaq alayhi salam we've mentioned, and Yaqub alayhi salam was his son. So Yaqub alayhi salam was from the, Yaqub alayhi salam was called Bani, was given the title of Israel. So that's why his progeny was called Bani Israel. His laqab was Israel. So you can see he's also he was located in Bayt al-Maqdis. Hazrat Ishaq alayhi salam, the son of Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam, who helped Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam build Masjid al-Aqsa, and he was located in Bayt al-Maqdis as well. And obviously they moved around. He used to go to Syria because they're prophets of Allah, and they have to spread the message. So their movement is according to the wahi, the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And secondly, he was and then Hazrat Yaqub alayhi salam, we know the story of Hazrat Yaqub alayhi salam from the Quran. Then what happened to him and his children, and what they did with Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam. All of this story unfolded in Bayt al-Maqdis and Palestine. And then it is also said that they were traveling to, the Syria, Haran. And then Hazrat Yaqub alayhi salam, the Ghayabat al-Jub, the well that Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam was thrown in, is said to be inside in this region. Some say it's near Galilee, which is a little bit above. You can see the just in where the Jordan River is, next to Al-Khalil and Al-Quds. On top of that, there's another water. There's another sea. It's called the Sea of Galilee. And then Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam, that well that he was thrown is said to be near that area as well. So from there, Hazrat Yaqub alayhi salam, when there was a drought that hit the area, they moved to Misr. And Allah had already planned for Yusuf alayhi salam to go. He was thrown in the well, and then from there he was taken. We know the story. A caravan took him out, and then they sold him as a slave in the market of Egypt. And Egypt at that time was ruled by Hyksos kings, who were the gypsy or the shepherd kings, before pharaohs. The pharaohs were not ruling the Egypt at that time. So he was taken to Egypt, and then we know the story that how he was made. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him eventually made the king of Egypt. And then his father joined him there. His father and his brothers joined him. Yaqub alayhi salam met his son Yusuf alayhi salam after so many years, and then they lived there, and they started to live there until later on the rule of Hyksos kings were overturned, and the Bani Israel were made slaves. And because they were with the Hyksos kings, they were hated and looked down upon because they had an alliance with the Hyksos. So the pharaohs took them as foreigners. They did not like them, and they were enslaved. And they lived in slavery until the prophethood of Musa alayhi salam. Now there's an important, let's please move on to the next slide. Yeah, sorry, I mentioned the story of Yusuf alayhi salam. They just a little, yes, please move on to the next slide of Yusuf alayhi salam. Yeah, this one. So, here I've mentioned this story this just now because Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam was in Al-Quds, around the area, and then he was taken to Misr. We can see the green line. Yes, this one. Yeah. You can see the green line, which marks the trajectory of Yusuf alayhi salam. And then there's the story of the well. I've just mentioned the Ghayabat al-Jub. Let's please move on to the next slide. Yeah. So now comes the time of Musa alayhi salam. I think the slide cannot be seen completely. If you can just pinch it smaller. Yeah, thank you. Jazakallah khair. So Prophet Musa alayhi salam and Yusha bin Nun. So there's a connection between them. That's why I wrote it together. And we can see that Hazrat Musa alayhi salam, though he is closest to the Holy Land in his relationship and what Allah sent to him, and he said to his nation as well that you have to take them to his mission was to take Bani Israel to the Holy Land, but he never got to enter the Holy Land. And why? What happened? So here we can see that it actually starts from, you can see from the left. Now you have to look from Misr on the left side. So he was born in Memphis, in the area where it was ruled by pharaohs. And we know the story that Pharaoh at that time, the Pharaoh was killing all the children of, like the boys of Bani Israel. So, and he already killed 70,000 boys. And when he was born, his mother was very scared. And then she put him in the water and he reached the palace of Pharaoh, and his wife wanted to raise him as their own son. So we know this story. And then what happened? So there's an interesting point to note here that the Bani Israel were enslaved. So they had colonized slave mentality, and Hazrat Musa alayhi salam was not enslaved because he was raised as a prince in the palace of Pharaoh. So this is what happened. This was Allah's plan. And because when you are in slavery, you are not able to fight. You cannot even think of rising above, this slave mentality and, fight for your rights and rise up against a tyrant. So this is a very interesting point that for us to take from this story, that it was, so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told Hazrat Musa that you have to take them out because they cannot rise up against this tyrant in this land. And we know from the ayat of the Quran, the story is very long. It's mentioned so many times in the Quran, and the behavior of Bani Israel is mentioned so many times because it's a lesson for us. It's very, especially if we see now, because the Muslims are enslaved, the minds are enslaved, they've been colonized, and they cannot rise up. They cannot even think of fighting against tyrants. So this story is very relevant. So the command of Allah was to take Bani Israel out of slavery from this land, so they can rise up against this, and then they can be decolonized. So Hazrat Musa alayhi salam takes them out of there, and then they go to Sinai. So this triangle in the middle, this piece of land is the land between Egypt and Palestine. This is called Sinai Peninsula, and this is where Hazrat Musa alayhi salam received his prophethood in Tur Sinin, like the Tur mountain is here as well. Some people do say that the Tur they talk about is in Arabia, but it makes a lot of sense, more sense because this part is called Tur Sinin. It's called Sinai as well. So Tur and Sinin is mentioned together. So Sinai is still called Sinai, and then the Tur mountain was here as well, where Musa alayhi salam was given prophethood, and then he was returning from Madian, he received the prophethood, he went to Egypt, and he gave dawah to Pharaoh, and he took his people of Bani Israel out of the place, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala parted the seas for him, and he returned. Now this is the sea between Sinai Peninsula and Egypt. This is the Red Sea. And he took them from there. And this is where, around this place between Sinai and this sea, was the place where the 12 springs, when Hazrat Musa alayhi salam hit his staff, the 12 springs came out. So this is where it happened as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then they enter the Sinai, and then they have, they are the nation that have never fought against anyone. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells them, please move on to the next slide. Allah gave command to Hazrat Musa alayhi salam that you enter the Holy Land. So Allah is telling them, then he says to his nation, Ya qawm idkhulu al-ard al-muqaddasata allati kataba Allahu lakum. Allah has written this holy land for you. We have to enter this. And then they cannot even, we know the nature of Bani Israel. They've seen idol worship under Pharaoh. They were doing that. And as soon as they enter Sinai, they've seen amazing miracles of Allah. They've seen the sea part. And as soon as they enter Sinai, they see a nation worshipping idols. And they say to Musa alayhi salam, make an idol for us. We want to worship an idol. And as Musa alayhi salam, like, look, you've not seen what has happened before. You not seen the miracles of Allah. You've suffered so much under this, the Pharaoh who was an idol worshipper, and now you're asking for me to make an idol. And they do. And when Musa alayhi salam goes to the Tur, mountain of Tur, we know that they do fall into idolatry. And then Harun alayhi salam is, telling them, giving them the message of Allah, and he's telling them that, you have to stop this. And then they try to kill Hazrat Harun alayhi salam. And then Hazrat Harun alayhi salam tells Hazrat Musa alayhi salam that this is what happened. And Hazrat Musa alayhi salam is so upset. And then, then they're given so many, bounties of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They give manna wa salwa, but they're still not happy. So this is also a part of slave mentality. Then they cannot even, appreciate the blessings they've been given. And then they can't even, take on the mission that Allah has chosen for them. And they go to Musa alayhi salam, قالوا يا موسى إن فيها قوما جبارين. Like they are tyrants, oppressors, like there's big strong nation there, we cannot fight. There are mighty people in it. We will never enter it until they depart from it. Now look, Allah is telling them to go fight, go in the Holy Land, and they're saying we are not going to fight. Until they leave, we cannot enter. And حتى يخرجوا منها فإن يخرجوا منها فإن داخلون. So if they leave, then we can enter. So this is after that what happened. So this is the same. We can compare this scenario right now as well. That Allah has given this land to the Muslims, the Bayt al-Maqdis, and Muslims choose not to fight for it, not to free it. And then what happened to Qawm Musa? They were banished in the wilderness for 40 years. Yatihuna fil ard. We know the story that they were just going around, in this wilderness of Sinai, and they were banished. They were banned to enter the Holy Land. And then what happened? That the next generation that was born in that, in Sinai, who were not as colonized as their parents, as the older generation, they were able to think about this. And then Hazrat Musa alayhi salam's time nearly came to the end, and then they entered the Holy Land under another person who, some people say he was a prophet, but then some say he was not a prophet. So he could be a prophet because he's mentioned in the story of Musa and Khadir. And then the story, we know that what happened in Surah Al-Kahf, that where he forgot the fish. So who was with him? It was Hazrat Yusha ibn Nun. And so his nation rejects. They don't fight. And then the next generation that is raised inside that grew up in this wilderness was decolonized. They were under the Prophet Musa and Harun alayhim salam. And then they were brave. And then Allah commanded Hazrat Yusha bin Nun to take them. Please move on to the next slide. To take them into the Holy Land, and they entered from the eastern gates of the Bayt al-Maqdis. So now Hazrat Musa alayhi salam knew the importance of Holy Land, and he wanted to go there, but he was not able to go because of his nation, his people, Bani Israel. But then it was his end. It was the end of his life. The time came for him to die. And then Hazrat, we know this hadith is very popular hadith. And then he prayed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that you can read this hadith. It's a long hadith. But the important point in this is that he said to Allah that please make me die as closer as possible to the Holy Land, as close as a stone throw away. He said, he asked Allah that he bring him near the sacred land at a distance of a stone's throw. Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has told us. And then he said, I saw the grave of Musa Alayhi Salam when he went to Mi'raj, and it's in the, with the red, there's a, mountain range of red hills, red mountains, and it's there from the side of the Jordan, because Hazrat Musa Alayhi Salam never got to enter the Holy Land with Bani Israel. Let's please move on to the next slide. So the next generation of Bani Israel who grew up in the wilderness and were not enslaved conquers the Holy Land under Yusha bin Nun. So there's a hadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. This is a Hassan hadith, Hassan. And it's in, no, this is Sahih hadith, sorry. This is a Sahih hadith. And then Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, Inna shamsa lam tuhbas ala bashar illa liyusha. And the sun was never, no. The sun was never held or from setting for any human except Yusha on the night he marched to Bayt al-Maqdis. So this is in this English translation, they've used the word Jerusalem, but basically it does not specifically means the city of Jerusalem, but the Holy Land. So they marched, because it was Friday, they were fighting on a Friday, and the next day was Sabbath, the Sabbath, which is called the Saturday, that where it was, the fighting was, it was prohibited on Saturday, so they could not fight. So Yusha bin Nun prayed to Allah, and then Allah granted him his dua, and then the sun was stopped, the sun did not set, and then they fought until the time of the sunset, and they conquered the Holy Land. They entered, that was the beginning, that they entered the Holy Land under Yusha bin Nun. Please move on to the next slide. So now it's the time where Hazrat Musa alayhi salam and Hazrat Musa alayhi salam's nation, Bani Israel has entered the Holy Land, and they are ruling the Holy Land. They're living in the Holy Land. They are, being successful. They did there was a very glorious period that they still remember, which is the period of Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman alayhi salam. So Allah gave Dawood and Sulaiman alayhim salam both some supernatural, amazing powers, miraculous powers, which and they were ruling from the Holy Land. So this is Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam and Sulaiman salam both are said to have built Bayt al-Maqdis, the city of Bayt al-Maqdis, this amazing city that they built at that time. It was started by Dawood alayhi salam, and some say it was completed by Sulaiman alayhi salam, and has Sulaiman alayhi salam renovated Masjid al-Aqsa. Now, I've not separated this construction of Masjid al-Aqsa, but we are covering this in this topic. So we learned last time that Masjid al-Aqsa was built by, who remembers? Who built Masjid al-Aqsa? What did we say about it? Does anyone remember?
Ibrahim alayhi salam.
We said he did build Masjid al-Aqsa, but who else built Masjid al-Aqsa? Who was the first one to build Masjid al-Aqsa? Adam alayhi salam, yeah. So there are different aqwal for this. So some say, because we have a very clear hadith of Hazrat Abu Dharr that we mentioned last time, that Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was asked that which was the first house of Allah built on earth. So Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, is Kaaba, Bayt al-Haram. And then he said, after this, then he said Masjid al-Aqsa. And how many years were between them? 40 years. So now if we say that some people don't start it from Adam alayhi salam, but Adam alayhi salam was the messenger of monotheism, Tawheed. So there was, when prophets are sent, there's definitely some house of monotheism that was built, and then Allah would not leave, Muslims and people and Adam alayhi salam without a masjid. So I'm going to quote some scholars here. So Imam Ibn Hajar and Imam Ibn al-Jawzi, they cleared up this confusion, because some people say, some of us have said that Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam built Masjid al-Haram, and then Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salam built Masjid al-Aqsa. But Sulaiman alayhi salam, if we take this, then there's thousands of years between Ibrahim alayhi salam and Sulaiman alayhi salam. So Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salam reconstructed or renovated Masjid al-Aqsa, as did a lot of other prophets. Because if we think about the construction of Ibrahim alayhi salam, it was probably Masjid al-Aqsa was destroyed, but the boundaries were always, determined by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that this is like Kaaba's boundaries are there, determined by Allah, that this is the boundary of the holy house of Allah. And similarly, it goes for Masjid al-Aqsa. So that Ibrahim alayhi salam most probably built Masjid al-Aqsa as well. And as we mentioned last time as well, the Tufan and Nuh, the the flood that came, everything was more destroyed on earth. So if there was a Kaaba, if there was some building there, it was probably destroyed, and there was nothing there. And his Ibrahim alayhi salam raised its on its foundations. So and then Imam Jawzi and Imam Ibn Hajar, they have clarified this confusion that Ibrahim alayhi salam was probably not the first person to build Masjid al-Aqsa and Masjid al-Haram, because there was probably a house of Allah on earth before that. That was prophets before were, centered around. So they were the ones who renovated it or reconstructed it, and it was already there. And then some people have said that how Sulaiman alayhi salam built Masjid al-Aqsa, which is true in a way that he reconstructed and renovated, because these are very common questions. These are very common confusions that come in people's mind. And in our books, in books of tafsir, we've seen that it's written that Sulaiman alayhi salam built Haikal, or built a temple, or built something. But it's very important to notice that Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salam was a believer, was a prophet of Allah, and he built why would he build a temple? He built a masjid. And we have this hadith Hasan from Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and we're going to mention in Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salam's story that no. So let's talk about Hazrat Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam's rule from Baitul Maqdis, which was also centered around this area. You can see both maps are of maps of Palestine, covering some parts of Syria, Jordan, and this is where they were all centered, and all the the tribes and all the nations of Bani Israel were here, and it was a very mighty rule, very successful rule, and they were very powerful. But then, obviously, when they changed the scriptures, they rejected the message of Allah, and what corruption they did, and we know what they did to Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. So Allah took everything from them, and now in their books, it's very important to notice, our teachers especially mention this, that they believe in King David and King Solomon, and their idea of King David and King Solomon is completely different from Prophet Dawood and Prophet Sulaiman alayhi salam. Please don't. So they say Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam was they put in Torah, in their scriptures, they put a very heinous, you will say, and very bad blame on Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam. And that it's a long story. There's not enough time to mention here, but then it's like he committed a sin. And then for the Sulaiman alayhi salam also, they say he married women, and they invited him to idolatry, and then he started worshipping idols. He listened to his wives, and and then I think from there comes the idea of temple, because everything has been changed in their books. Everything is there's tahrif. So they changed the story of Sulaiman alayhi salam and Dawood alayhi salam completely, and they don't even mention them as prophets. They mention them as kings only. So, and then obviously then they can say that he built a temple, because they believe that Hazrat Sulaiman alayhi salam, King Solomon, listened to his wife, and he started idolatry, and then Allah rejects in the Quran, ma kafara Sulaiman walakin ash-shayatin kafar. So they in the tafsir, I've read that they also this is actually the rejection of the idol worship and of Hazrat Sulaiman Islam, because he was a believer. And why would he Hazrat Sulaiman Islam built Masjid al-Aqsa, and we mentioned the Masjid al-Aqsa is built facing the Kaaba. So the Qibla is Masjid al-Haram, and Masjid al-Aqsa was built facing the Kaaba. So it's very important to keep in mind that he was a Muslim prophet, and our idea of Prophet Sulaiman is completely different from the King Solomon, King David of the Jews. Just please move on to the next slide. And then the story of Talut and Jalut. The King Saul is called King Saul in Bible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala appointed a king who was pious, who was knowledgeable. In the Quran, the story of Talut. And Bani Israel, when they were believers. Look, when they were believers, they were always good people among them. And they went to the Prophet, and they said, appoint a commander for us. We want to do jihad. We want to fight in the sake of Allah. So Allah appointed Jalut, and they were not very happy with not Jalut, astaghfirullah, Talut. And they're not very happy because Talut was not from a very good lineage. He was not a very rich person. And a lot of people started talking. So Allah said, what's needed is ilm, knowledge, and the physical might. And he had both of them. So Allah appointed him, and they did jihad against him. And then there's a long story that, Allah told them to not drink from this, river. And they were so thirsty, they drank. And all, apart from only very few people, the few believers were left. And then they were the only ones who didn't drink. So the test of Allah is the same. The story just repeats itself. And then there's the story of Dawood and Jalut, that in that fight, Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam was a very young boy, and he killed the Goliath. The story of Goliath. And Goliath is said to be from there was a part of Canaan at that time which was called Philistia. Philistia was still there, but it was only a little part of Holy Land. What happened? So it was only a little part of the Holy Land, and he fought. Hazrat Dawood alayhi salam was given this, special powers by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he aimed at his eye, and he, from his, thing, and he took his eye out, the Goliath, and he was a giant man, very mighty, powerful man. If you can just give me 1 minute, please. So this whole event of Dawood and Jalut, this is also from the stories of the Holy Land, and also the story of Talut. Let's please move on to the next slide. So this dua of Sulaiman alayhi salam I just mentioned, it also clarified that he constructed Masjid al-Aqsa, Bayt al-Maqdis. The city that he was ruling from was Bayt al-Maqdis. And if we can go to the maps, please, just 2 slides behind. So we can see that they were the center of Hazrat Dawood and Sulaiman alayhi salam were the cities of Bayt al-Maqdis and Asqalan. Asqalan is presently called Ashkelon. Asqalan, there's also a Wadi al-Naml there, which is where the story of ants took place. In Surah al-Naml is very clearly Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in detail. Allah has, related that story. So Wadi al-Naml is there in Asqalan, and this is, one of the places that they were in Bayt al-Maqdis. Yes, please, you can go back to those slides. Yeah. The one behind. So this is when Sulaiman ibn Dawood finished building Bayt al-Maqdis. He asked Allah for 3 things: judgment that was in harmony with his judgment, and a dominion that none after him would have, and that no one should come to the masjid intending only to pray there, but he would emerge as free of sin as the day his mother bore him. So he asked Allah for these after he finished constructing Bayt al-Maqdis, and one of them is like, he's asking for the reward of Hajj. Like we do Hajj and then we are free of all sins. So he asked for that dua from Allah. And Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said 2 prayers were granted, and I hope that the third one was also granted. So if you imagine if the third one was granted, so praying in Bayt al-Maqdis will clean all your sins, like you are free of sins after the Hajj. Now see how revered, how holy, and how sacred, important this mosque is that the Ummah has forsaken today. Let's please move on to the next slide. Yeah. So we've heard the story of Hazrat Zakaria and Hazrat Yahya alayhim salam. And please move on to the next slide. I'm going to come back to this slide. Let's please mention Hazrat Maryam and Hazrat oh, there's a slide missing. Is this slide empty? Yes, this one. Sorry. Yeah. Hazrat Isa and Hazrat Maryam. So Hazrat Maryam, we can see Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, we mentioned last time that the Rabwa that Quran mentioned is near Bayt al-Maqdis. So when Hazrat Maryam used to worship inside a room in Masjid al-Aqsa in Bayt al-Maqdis, because she was, her mom, her mother, when she was born, she was given for the zikr of Allah, for the service of she wanted a child for the service of the holy house of Allah, for Bayt al-Maqdis. She wanted to give it in the way of Allah. She did, she wanted to do this dua. When Hazrat Maryam was born, she was a girl, so she was given as for worship inside this Bayt al-Maqdis. So she used to worship from Bayt al-Maqdis all the time. And then this is where Hazrat Zakaria alayhi salam came, and he saw the fruits that Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam was eating, and the food that was given to her. And then he saw this miracle of Allah, and he asked Allah for a child, who was Hazrat Yahya alayhi salam. So this here on the right side is an image where you can see the few steps of the stairs. So this is the chamber of Maryam inside Masjid al-Aqsa. This is you can say as a as a you can say a tribute and as a commemoration to Hazrat Maryam alayhi salam's presence in Bayt al-Maqdis and in Masjid al-Aqsa. They've built this. It's on the extreme right corner, because Quran mentioned Makanan Sharqiyya. She went into a Makanan Sharqiyya when she was about to deliver Hazrat Isa alayhi salam. So just to, as a tribute, they built this room in the extreme right Mashriq Sharq corner of Masjid al-Aqsa. And then there's also in the same room, there's a cradle of Isa alayhi salam, just to commemorate that Isa alayhi salam was born in Bayt al-Maqdis and Hazrat Maryam used to stay here. So all these are ma'alim, all these are just, you can say domes, and there's a lot of domes, and there's a lot of history related to Masjid al-Aqsa. When you, inshallah, when one day, if we visit Masjid al-Aqsa, you can see that there's domes and there's walls and there's buildings that are named after prophets. There's a dome of Mi'raj there. So it's to mark the presence of the prophets, and like people like Maryam alayhi salam. And his mother's house was very close to Masjid al-Aqsa, and the Christians later named it Saint Anne's Church because she was called Hannah. So they called her Anne, and St. Anne's Church is just next to, the door, which is called the door of Sayyida Maryam, Bab Sitti Maryam in Masjid al-Aqsa. So there's a lot of history. There's a lot of, history of the prophets that is just joined with Masjid al-Aqsa. In the map, it shows the movement Hazrat Isa alayhi salam, and it is also said that Maryam alayhi salam took him to Egypt as well. So there's some narrations from Bible and there's some from history. So it's disputed, but still it's there on the map. So, but basically he was in Bayt al-Maqdis and around the area, and Bayt Laham. So the exact place where he's said to be born is Bayt Laham, which is a city in Palestine right now. It is on the map as well. Just below Al-Quds, it's Bayt Laham. It's called Bethlehem in English. And Christians also believe his movement to be in Nazareth, which is called Nasra in Arabic, and Tabariya, which is on the north. You can see the green arrows on the top are taking us to Nasra and Tabariya, which is Tiberias and Nazareth. Okay, please move on to the next slide. Okay, now Zakaria alayhi salam, there's in Surah Maryam, there's a mention of Zakaria alayhi salam. وَدَخَلَ زَكَرِيَّ الْمَحْرَابِ. I think the ayah is like this, if I'm not wrong. So he enters a mihrab. So which mihrab was it? It was the mihrab of Masjid al-Aqsa. So he saw Hazrat Maryam, in worship there. And then he prayed to Allah for a son, which was Hazrat Yahya alayhi salam. So in Masjid al-Aqsa, they've built a mihrab, which is obviously not the very mihrab of Hazrat Zakaria, which was thousands of years ago, but just as a tribute or to remember this prophet, the presence of this prophet in Masjid al-Aqsa, they've made this mihrab. It's inside Jami al-Qibli, the grayish green dome we see now. It's inside that. That is the main prayer space of Masjid al-Aqsa. Inside Masjid al-Aqsa. So this is inside there. It's called Mihrab Zakaria. Okay, let's move on to our last one. This topic is very vast. It's so detailed, but I can only mention little bits and pieces here and there, and then try to connect all of you to Masjid al-Aqsa and Bayt al-Maqdis. And the last one is obviously, because the connection we have with our holy prophet, and if we see his presence inside Masjid al-Aqsa, it will definitely connect us and to Masjid al-Aqsa, to Bayt al-Maqdis. And also, why did Allah take him from the from Mecca to Bayt al-Maqdis. So there was a, Mecca is in Saudi Arabia, obviously, and Jerusalem and Bayt al-Maqdis is in where we've just seen. So he was taken in a night's journey to Bayt al-Maqdis, and from Bayt al-Maqdis he went to the Mi'raj. He was taken to the heavens. So there's obviously a big wisdom in that. And then why this is where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam led all the prophets in prayer in congregation, and he was given the leadership of the flag of leadership. He was and it was an announcement. It was a big event that the leadership of the Ummah, like you can say the chosen people, was given from Bani Israel to Bani Ismail. And this is what the Jews did not like. That's why they rejected our prophet as well. The why is he not from among us? They were looking for a prophet. They had settled in Medina for a prophet, but they lost the opportunity to believe in him, and they were from among the unsuccessful people. So this congregation of all the prophets that gathered. Now see how much barakah there is in this land, and where all the prophets gathered. As Musa alayhi salam is praying to Allah that he be buried as close to this land. And also in the story of Yusuf alayhi salam, we didn't mention, there's a hadith of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam which says that when, as Yusuf alayhi salam has said, that when you go to Holy Land, whenever you go, you take my body from the grave, you exhume it, and then you take it with you to the Holy Land. And Bani Israel did it. When they were about to leave, Musa alayhi salam asked that anybody knows, and then there was an old woman that knew where the body of Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam was, which was near, I think, Nile, the river Nile. And he was exhumed from there, and he was, that's a long hadith, but I'm just, summarizing it. And he was taken with them to the Holy Land, and he's said to be buried in the same place where Hazrat Ibrahim alayhi salam was buried. It's a cave where a lot of prophets are said to be buried with Ibrahim alayhi salam, Ishaq, Yaqub, their wives, the children, and Hazrat Yusuf alayhi salam. So, and the very place where Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam landed in Bayt al-Maqdis, and he tied his buraq, it was a buraq wall. It's now called buraq wall, which I mentioned last time. The Jews have taken over that place, the wall. They call it the Wailing Wall. So there's a part of Muslim, Islamic history that it was a wall that where our Holy Prophet tied buraq, and the hadith is that where the other prophets used to tie the animal, I tied my animal there. So I think it's in the same hadith of 40 hadith about Bayt al-Maqdis. Inshallah, at the end of this, we will share this book. It's very helpful to read all the hadiths that are related to Bayt al-Maqdis. Okay. So there's a lot to be said in Mi'raj and the connection of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam with this land, and how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam developed the connection of Sahaba and Sahabiyat with this holy land. And they used to come to Holy Prophet. They used to ask about the Holy Land and the sawab of the prayers in Masjid al-Aqsa, and what can we do? Because at that time it was under the Roman, Roman Empire. It was colonized by the Romans with the Byzantines. And so they used to ask for Nabi Sallallahu to pray there, to go there, to travel there. And then it was finally conquered in the time of Hazrat Umar radiallahu anhu. So I will take the questions if there's any confusion in this, and we will, inshallah, if we have time in this series, we will try to cover from the Sira aspect as well, because all these points are going to connect you more to Sira. And when you go into the story to Ibrahim alayhi salam and Nabi Sallallahu Mi'raj and all this, so it will make a lot more sense. And then when we will talk about the wars and the ghazawat that were done towards for the conquest of Bayt al-Maqdis, Sham, Masjid al-Aqsa, then you will understand, it will connect more dots, inshallah, and you will understand, from this aspect as well, inshallah. So we'll take questions if there are any questions. I tried to cover as much as possible in these 40 minutes, so 45 minutes.
Jazakallah khair, Sister Hafsa, it was lovely. A beautiful explanation. If someone has any question, then please come forward. Any questions?
If you don't have any questions, I can take the feedback or comments. That what did you learn? What did you find? Anything striking or anything that was surprising or anything that you find is useful? Any takeaways from this?
Jazakallah khair, sister. It was a beautiful presentation. I think the maps really helped for to us to visualize as to really, because yes, we understand that this is the Holy Land, but looking at the maps and the arrows and the whole geography, that really puts everything into perspective as to really how what was going on and which prophet was where. So yeah, I thought the maps for me personally were quite useful, especially given the fact that things have changed so much now, especially with the boundaries and the borders. So Jazakallah khair.
Barakallah fi. That was the main, purpose. That was the main goal behind it. That's why we shared it. So because we read everything like in our heads, we don't use the maps, we don't use, the geography. So that was the purpose, and it was basically to, give people the idea that this was happening where it's happening, the Holy Land, the blessed land, and we just so disconnected from this land.
Anyone else wants to say something?
Some people have shared their points in the chat, and I'm reading them. Yeah, mashallah. These were the takeaway that, the fact Bani Israel refused to fight for the sacred land, and the history is repeating itself. It definitely is. And okay, how they buried Yusuf alayhi salam if they were not entered to the Holy Land under Musa alayhi salam. So, yeah, that's a very good question. So, has Yusuf alayhi salam's body is not confirmed to be there where it is now. So it was they took it where they went at that time, and then when they entered under Yusuf bin Nun alayhi salam, I think that's when they buried it. But obviously, nothing can be said for sure about these. That's why I said ulama have said only two people, two prophets, graves are confirmed, and one of them Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and then Ibrahim alayhi salam. We can't be sure of anyone else because there's a maqam Musa in Jordan, near Jordan. They call it maqam Musa, which is said to be the grave of, according to someone's dream and this that, but this not that is we can't be sure. And also there's maqam Yusuf alayhi salam inside in Masjid al Ibrahimi, which is obviously not the grave, but is just for to remember Hazmuz Yusuf alayhi salam. And then there's a place, in Palestine, which is said that the Haz Yusuf alayhi salam's grave is there. So which is a different place. So we can't be sure of this, of the graves, and this is not confirmed. And someone has said that Allah's help does not come until you take the step. Yes, this was the whole point of the story of Musa alayhi salam. That how did Bani Israel, what happened to them? And they refused to, Allah was directly commanding through a prophet that go fight, and land is written for you. This is amazing that when you are enslaved and colonized, you can't even appreciate the blessing of Allah. This is what really strikes me. And then this when we see now as well, when we talk about some high self-esteem or superior psychology, or we talk about these things, the colonized mind and the enslaved mind, it will always come back with such excuses, and they will refuse to accept that status that Allah has given us. Okay, I think we've covered all the points, and inshallah we'll continue on this next lecture. Next lesson is going to be very important, inshallah. We're going to cover different, aspects of this Palestine series. We're going to be talking about Christian Zionism and Jewish Zionism and the state of Israel, and then I've connected it to the land of jihad and ribat. Like in the end time prophecies is very important for them, and how the Jews and Christians see it, and how their movement of Zionism has affected actually destroyed this holy land, and then affected the Palestinians, the Muslims all around the world, and how they've planned, to take over this. So we're going to look at it from Islamic perspective, that it is the land of jihad, ribat, and future khilafah, that's why it's even more important for us, because it's just not about our past, it's about our future as well. And then the Christian evangelicals design and the Zionist movement, inshallah. So I will inshallah wind up this session. Let's read the dua and end this session, inshallah. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك ونتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. جزاك الله خيرا.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله
السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته. ما شاء الله لا قوة إلا بالله.